Welcome to Semeion. Yeah, God did that.
Episode 3 The Eye. Part 1 Millions of Parts and Pieces. The human eye is one of the most amazing structures on this planet. It is the second most complex organ of the body, just behind the brain. It consists of over 100 million parts, all in something about the size of a ping pong ball, functioning together so that you may see the world around you. It is so amazing in its function that there is still a great deal that we do not understand about how it works. In this episode, we are going to focus on the necessary components of the eyeball for its function. In so doing, we will observe how all these various components come together to form a functional eye, and how, in the absence of any component, and even more so in multitude, then the eye would not be able to work at all. This is a concept called irreducible complexity. This basically means that the systems must be present as a more or less complete package in order for it to work at all. This is important because these systems could not have evolved one step at a time and be beneficial to the fitness of the organism, but must be present in whole to be functional, i.e., Semeion. Irreducible systems are strong evidence for the work of God, the Creator. Here we have a typical human eye, as you may have seen in the mirror, and an anatomical view you may have seen in textbooks. Now let's go over some of the most visual parts that you may be familiar with. As we go over these parts, we will also talk a little about what they do, but you should also keep in mind that many parts have many functions in the system. Our goal is to hit the bigger points, to see the greater functionality as a whole. Part 1. The eyelids. Responsible for a whole multitude of things. They act as a barrier to things entering the eye. By closing them, you can keep light from entering the eye so you can sleep, but also to protect from exposure to a very bright light source that may damage the eye. They contain glands that generate lubricating substances that keep the eye clean and moist. And by blinking, they adequately distribute these tear films across the surface to maintain your eye health. Number 2, the sclera, which is the white of the eye. This covers 80% of the eyeball, but the interesting thing is you only see about 1/6 of the whole eyeball on average. It is white on the outside, but brown on the inside, and a thin layer called the episclera lies on top of the sclera and has tiny blood vessels to provide nutrients. The white surface of the sclera has grooves that allow for the attachment of the eye muscles so that the eye can move to see different objects. Number 3, the conjunctiva, which is a transparent layer of skin tissue covering the sclera and the inside of the eyelid. This is the tissue that generates mucus and tears to help lubricate and protect the eye, to protect from microorganisms and debris, and has immune system function applications as well. Number 4, the iris, the pretty part of the eye, which is unique to every single person. This is the colored part of the eye and contains 2 thin layers of smooth muscle. The pupillary sphincter, which is a circular muscle which shrinks the size of a hole, and the dilator, which is a circular muscle that expands the size of the hole, which work together to control the size of the pupil. Number 5, the pupil, though, which is not an object in and of itself, but rather the hole in the center of the iris. The pupil appears black because the light that enters the eye is absorbed and is not reflected back out. Through changing the size of the pupil, the iris is able to control the amount of light that enters the eye so that the system is adaptive to its environment, allowing more light in when it is darker and reducing the amount of light when it is brighter so that the system is not overloaded. This function also is important in the accommodation reflex, which is the ability to shift focus from near to far objects and vice versa, far to near. Number 6, the cornea, is a clear protective layer that sits over the iris. This acts along with the sclera to provide additional protection from foreign objects and microorganisms. It is the initial interface for light and bends the light as it passes through it, aiding in focus. It also filters out a large amount of UV, which is very damaging to the internal structures of the eye. The cornea is the only part of the body, interestingly enough, that does not have its own blood supply and gets its oxygen straight from the air. It is also the fastest healing tissue of the body, allowing it to be repaired quickly when it is scratched, often in as little as 24 hours. Number 7, the retina, is the light-sensitive layer that covers the inside rear surface of the eye. It contains rod cells, about 90 million of them, which detect black, white, and more than 500 shades of gray, and are responsible for mostly the peripheral vision system. They respond primarily to light intensity and brightness, and function well in dim light. The retina also contains 3 types of cone cells, about 5 million cells, which detect red, green, and blue light waves, and combined they allow the detection of almost 7 million different colors. These function well in bright light. Cone cells are also not present in equal ratios as you might think they would be. For instance, it's 65% red, 30% green, and around 5% blue on average. Cones are concentrated in the center of the retina called the macula, and especially so in a small depression in the macula called the fovea, which gathers about 80 to 90% of the visual information and allows for high visual acuity. The retina contains about 1.5 million nerve cells that collect and transport all of this information to the brain. Number 8, the choroid, is the layer between the sclera and the retina. This is the primary vascular layer of the eye and delivers the bulk of nutrients and oxygen to the retina. This layer also reflects red light when extreme amounts of light are present, which causes the red eye effect that you see in photographs sometimes. Number 9, the eye muscles control the movement of the eyeball in the eye socket. Now, we didn't mention the eye socket before, but remember, you got to have some place to put your eye, so you need an eye socket. The eyeball is controlled by 6 muscles: the superior and the inferior rectus, which move the eye up and down; the medial and the lateral rectus, which move the eye left and right; the superior and the inferior obliques, which roll the eye inward and outward. Remember, moms, when your children roll their eyes at you, they're actually practicing the movement of their superior and their inferior obliques, as allowed for by God. Now, without these 6 muscles working in unison, the eye would be fixed in place, and the head would have to move to focus on different objects. And what's interesting too is these are the fastest moving muscles in your body. They function in as little as 1/100th of a second. Number 10, the lens, is a transparent structure located behind the iris. The lens is held in place by the suspensory ligaments, known as the fibers of Zen, to the ciliary body and muscle. This system allows for the lens curvature and thickness to be changed for the system to focus on objects at different distances. Number 11, the optic nerve. As I mentioned back in the retina section, the retina contains around 1.5 million nerve cells. These cells are bundled together in what is known as the optic nerve bundle, or also as cranial nerve 2. These nerve cells transfer all of the information collected by the rods and cones of the eyes to the visual cortex of the brain to be processed, so all this information can be used to allow you to interact with your environment. Keep in mind that sufficient slack must also be present in the optic nerve bundle to allow for the movement of the eyeball in the eye socket. Number 12, the vitreous body. Filled with vitreous humor. And we call it humor because it's a body fluid, and body fluids are funny. Which is a viscous jelly, though, like liquid that fills the area between the retina and the lens. This helps keep the shape of the eye, which is required for correctly focusing the light on the receptors of the retina. And it makes up 80% of the volume of the eye. And the nature of the liquid in clarity and viscosity is critical, since all the light that enters the eye passes through the vitreous humor, which has a unique refractive index of its own. This means that it also bends the light that passes through it, which must be compensated by all the other aspects of the eyeball anatomy. This brief overview of the major parts of the eye that have to be present and work together gives you an idea of the amazing complexity of the human eye. Now look at it this way. There are about 100,000 functional genes, as we understand so far, in the human genome. Around 7,500 genes are involved in developing and regulating the retina. That's almost 8%. In the next episode, we will discuss the amazing brain side of the visual system and how the miracle of vision is truly a gift of God the Creator. Until then, ponder this. Quote, to suppose that the eye, with all its inimitable contrivance for adjusting the focus to different distances, for admitting different amounts of light, and for the correction of spherical and chromatic aberration, could have been formed by natural selection seems, I freely confess, absurd in the highest possible degree. Charles Darwin in The Origin of the Species. We are truly blessed to see firsthand the work of God, the Father, the Creator, in the world around us.
Semeion! Yeah, God did that.